So this past year, I got the chance to hear a few of my favorite bands and artists live in concert. And we also got a chance to take our kids to their first concert experience along with some of their friends. It was a lot of fun. So our family, we listened to a lot of music, both at home and in the car. But it had been a really long while, at least for me, since I got a chance to experience live music like that. And I noticed something about pretty much every time we left one of those experiences. We were all looking at each other saying the same thing. They are so much better live. They're so much better. That happens so much of the time, doesn't it? We can listen to somebody's music for years and know all the words by heart. But there's just something extra that happens when we see them perform it live. We get a chance to hear the stories behind the songs and see the full range of emotion that they convey when they're singing those words that we know by heart. And I think this is true even when it's imperfect. In fact, sometimes it's true especially when it's imperfect. I love it when you see a performer who's having to navigate through technical difficulties in real time, and they're just an actual human, and you see them diffuse that with humor, and they work together with their bandmates, and you see that connection that they have. Or when an artist that can't remember the words to a song that they themselves wrote, and the entire fan base jumps in to help get them back on track. I just love that connection that you have in a live environment. And then when you experience that, you come home and you listen to their recorded music, and it changes the way that you experience a connection there too, doesn't it? We begin to hear and notice more in these songs that we've heard a bajillion times once we've experienced them live. And I think this phenomenon is true in so many other environments as well. We experienced it in 2020 when we started gathering back together again after a COVID hiatus. And over again, we heard people saying things like, man, I'm so glad we had the online gatherings during that time. But it's just not the same as being here together. It's just not the same. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. The online gatherings make a fantastic supplement. I'm so glad we have those available, especially at times where somebody in our family is sick or we have to be traveling. And those gatherings are a lifeline to people in our Meadow Heights family who are experiencing being homebound because of long-term illness, or some of them who live so far away. It's not feasible for them to be part of our regular gatherings all the time. So it's a wonderful, fantastic supplement for us to have available. But it's a really poor substitute if we never get to experience worshiping together in the same room, right? Humans are just best experienced live. It's messier that way, but it's also magical in those moments. And that's the idea behind the good news that we're going to talk about today as we continue this series about what it looks like to become human in an online world. Our good news is that true community isn't found in the followers and filters. It's found when we come face to face with an actual neighbor to love. Brian kicked things off last week by establishing a level set that's going to be important for this whole series. He said, technology can be used for good or for evil in our lives. So it's really important that we make intentional choices about how we're going to navigate the online world well. And today we're going to talk about what it looks like for us to live in a hyper-connected world and how that impacts our experience of community together. Now, there are plenty of good things that technology has given us in terms of how we can develop connection and community. It's given us new ways to stay connected to friends and family who live far away. We have things like FaceTime and Zoom, and we can shoot a quick text to check in on somebody. I don't know if you guys are the same, but my siblings and I all live in different places, and we share ridiculous memes all day, every day. We never had that connection before or without technology. In the old days, we had to wait on things like snail mail to come. You'd hear from somebody 5 or 6 times a year in that world. But there are also new challenges that we have that get in the way of what it looks like to develop community and connection because of technology. And I think the impact of that can sneak up on us if we're not careful and intentional about it. So we're going to start by naming 3 of those challenges. And the first one is this: connection is not the same as community. Connection's not the same as community. So technology allows us to be connected to more people than ever before. We have all these connections. But sometimes the sheer number of people we're connected to, I think, can lull us into a false sense that we're experiencing authentic community with those people we're connected to. And the problem is that no matter how hard we try to be authentic online, digital platforms only ever allow us to see a one-time snapshot. And usually that snapshot is carefully curated, or selected so that edited so that it shows this idealized version that we're comfortable showing the world, right? Too often what that means is that our online persona becomes a false image that we've crafted to control other people's perception, and it comes at the expense of the unedited live action version of us. And it's that human, messy version of us that actually carries the image of God. That's where we see that in each other. Now, it's not just the intentional editing that's the problem, for those of us who don't even know how to edit things, because that would be me. It's also the limitations of the online medium itself. So I studied linguistics in college. One of the things that has stuck with me, a fact about that just always blows my mind, is that the actual words we choose when we're communicating, the specific word choice, only accounts for about 10% of what we're communicating. Which means that when we fire off a post on Facebook, it's missing 90% of what would be communicated if we were sitting across from a person in the same room. We miss the body language, the way that we inhabit and react to the environment we're in, the nonverbal feedback cues that we give each other as we're talking and they're talking. These are all crucial elements of communication that are lost in so many of our online interactions. Now, when we're talking about a number like 90% of communication factors being taken out of the equation, at best, we have to acknowledge that there's huge potential for miscommunication. And at worst, that actually begins to erode our real relationships and our sense of community. When we're not able to witness in real time the impact of the words that we choose and we fire off online on the real world humans. They're real humans on the other side of the screen, and we don't get a chance to see what we say or share, like how that's hitting them. This is why true community can't be found in followers and filtered. It's found when we actually come face to face with the neighbor to love. So online connection is not the same as developing real community. But there's another more insidious challenge that the online world poses to how we experience and develop community. And it's that the addiction is not an accident. This is not a fun one to talk about. We have to talk about it. We all joke about screen addiction. I think we all struggle with it to some degree or another, but it is a real challenge for many, many people, and a growing challenge. Online platforms exist, and they're available to us for free because they have been weaponized and monetized against us. Everything is curated to sell something to us or to sell us to something, which means that every time we're online, no matter how good our intentions are, there is an element of using one another in online interactions that is really, really tough for us to overcome. And guys, this isn't just some side effect we didn't see coming. It's actually by design. The apps, the digital platforms that most of us use every day were all directly and intentionally influenced by the work of a guy named B.F. Skinner, a very famous psychologist who spent his research years researching how to predict and control human behavior. And Skinner famously experimented by, he had these rats, and he put them in these little boxes with a lever outfitted. And if they would push the lever, they would get a little treat, and they were happy rats. So at first, when they discovered that this lever would bring them treats, they just went nuts, pushed the lever all the time, gorged themselves on the treats. Life was good. Well, eventually they learned, we can trust the lever. We push the lever, it'll give us food. And they went about their day, and when they got hungry, they'd go push the lever, get a treat, go back to what they were doing. So that's when Skinner changed the game. He reprogrammed the boxes so that they'd have to push the lever multiple times before they would get the treat. But the kicker was, it wasn't the same number of times every time. Sometimes it would be 3, sometimes it would be 5. There was no discernible pattern. And that's when things got interesting, because the rats went nuts. They started being obsessed with pressing the lever all the time, over and over and over again, to try to control it and figure out how to get what they wanted. Skinner called this idea variable ratio reinforcement, and it is the unique strategic design principle that's behind everything from slot machines to online games to targeted digital advertising campaigns and the social media platforms that we're on every day. Direct influence. All of them were literally engineered to give us just enough of a positive experience to keep us coming back for more, because we're terrified we're going to miss something if we're not there. We're going to miss out on that important post, or we're going to miss out on what everybody else is seeing, or the next big win or big hit, unless we keep pushing the proverbial lever over and over again. And it's easy when about stuff like this, I think to want to villainize the algorithm or tech billionaires or even Skinner himself. And there may be some validity to some of that. But the problem actually goes way further back than this, and it's way deeper. Last week, Brian talked about how we have a real spiritual enemy, and he's bent on our destruction. And he quoted a letter that Paul wrote to the Corinthians where he was urging them to do the hard work of forgiving each other so that they could insulate their community, protect their sense of connectedness from Satan. Let's read that again. It says, "If you forgive anyone for anything, I do too. And whatever I've forgiven, if I've forgiven anything, I did it for you in the presence of Christ. This is so that we won't be taken advantage of by Satan, because we are well aware of his schemes." Guys, the evil one's been at work since the Garden of Eden to try to distract and divide us, to lure us away from the peace and joy and real connection that God offers when we center our mind and heart in him. It started with a piece of fruit from an off-limits tree, and he has been using an impressive array of other technologies and developments ever since then. If you were here last week, you know Brian covered this trajectory and the history of how good advancements in society have been used for evil as well. So if you didn't get a chance to see that, catch up online. It's a really important foundation for this series. And, not surprisingly, catching up on messages online, that's one of the good ways that we can leverage technology. If we weren't able to be here, we can go back and watch it. If there was something that particularly struck us, we can save that and return to it over again. So leverage that in a good way, right? Today, one of the evil one's most effective tools to divide us from God and from one another is found in these digital platforms that lure us in by promising that we'll experience intimate online community with people who really get us without having to leave our couch or change out of our PJs. And that sounds great, but the problem is that they leave us unsatisfied. And then we're frantically searching for more because they were literally designed to do that. They were designed to exploit our God-given desire for community to make somebody else a buck. And that's a tough truth that we have to be aware of when we're engaging with the online world. That's why true community isn't found in followers and filters. It's found when we actually come face to face with a neighbor to love. And we have to learn to see the ways that online connections are designed to addict us and divide us, and then push back on that by actually nurturing community with others outside those digital echo chambers. And there's one more challenge we want to talk about, and I think it's that we often lack boundaries. And that's true both online and offline. And those two play into each other, unfortunately. So I think many of us, especially parents, are good about encouraging and enforcing good boundaries about online engagement for our kids, while at the same time being kind of terrible about applying those same limits to ourselves, right? I know that I've struggled with this at times. To some degree, I think most of us are probably aware of the first two challenges that we talked about, even if we're not actively thinking about them all the time. We're aware of the kind of damage that they can cause. But we usually haven't gone the next step to put structures or accountability in place to keep them from affecting our own lives and relationships. And then the flip side of that coin is that often we also struggle with boundaries in our analog in-person lives. So when we say yes to everything, or we don't know how to set healthy limits around things like work, or with challenging relationships in our lives, all of a sudden we've run ourselves to the point of exhaustion. And when we feel tapped out, where do we go? We pull the phone out of our pocket and we start to doom scroll online. And it becomes this vicious, uncomfortable cycle where because we've had no boundaries in our in-person life, all of a sudden we show up online already tapped out. We're more susceptible to living boundaryless online lives. We spend too much money, we waste too much time, and the way we interact with humans behind the buffer of a screen is a way that we would never talk to them in person, oftentimes. And then when we've done that and we've lived our online lives without boundaries, all of a sudden that starts to affect our offline life again. We're checked out, we're just staring at our screen instead of the real people in the room with us, or we're in debt because we did too much online shopping, or we got fired up about a fight in the comments section, and then we show up at dinner and we unleash all that aggression and anger on our family. Like, we have all struggled with this. Suddenly, we're not experiencing healthy connection anywhere, offline, online, and round this cycle goes, where living without boundaries in one environment affects our boundaries in another environment, And it just gets harder and harder to break through that to experience real connection. The addiction recovery community has a really helpful tool that I think it's simple, but it can really help us evaluate whether our current state of mind is in a place where we can or should engage with the online world. They say to practice halting. And I love this because HALT is both a reminder to pause, and it's an acronym. When we practice HALT, you just stop and ask yourself, okay, am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Tired? And if you can answer yes to one or more of those four things, there is a strong possibility that you are attempting to get legitimate needs met in false ways through like the quick dopamine hit that you can find online. And that quick surge of dopamine might be effective to numb and distract us from what you're feeling in the moment, but it's never going to satisfy our legitimate needs in a long-term way. And so we have to ask God, like we have to be honest with him, what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, and then ask him to show us the ways he's already at work to provide for our legitimate needs in ways that will actually sustain and replenish us. So halting is a way that we do that. We can just stop and ask, okay, what's going on with me right now? Like, what do you want me to see, God, about how I am experiencing the world physically, emotionally? And then we can act in ways that actually provide replenishment. So maybe instead of jumping on your phone and scrolling through social media, you say, okay, am I hungry, angry, lonely, tired? What am I experiencing right now? Maybe I need a snack and a nap. Maybe the reality is I'm already tapped out from the online world, and I need to set this aside and take like a Sabbath from my screen for a little bit. It could be that you're just really feeling loneliness and you're trying to find connection there, when instead you need to set that aside and reach out for real connection in the world, have an honest conversation with your spouse, or call a trusted friend and just tell them what's going on with you. But ultimately, the solution for all these challenges that the online world poses is the same. God is the ultimate antidote to our unconnectedness, and he wants to fulfill our need for true community. He created us with that desire, and he longs to meet it in ways that actually satisfy. One of my very favorite reminders of this truth in the Bible comes in Matthew 11, when Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are struggling hard and carrying heavy loads, and I will give you rest. Put on my yoke and learn from me. I'm gentle and humble, and you will find rest for yourselves." Some translations say, you will find rest for your souls. And like, who doesn't want that, right? Jesus says, come to him. He's the source of that stuff. When we start by finding rest and replenishment and connection with God, then we're able to approach both our online and our offline worlds with wisdom and clear eyes. Because we're not numbing out or scrambling to try to find a quick fix to feel like our needs are met. God knows your needs better than you do. And he cares more than you do about how those are going to be met in ways that will satisfy and sustain you. So when we center our hearts and our minds in his love first, that gives us the discernment that we need to then see the online world for what it is and be able to show up and engage it with wisdom. And then we can nurture the kinds of real world relationships that actually provide the community we're all searching for. True community isn't going to be found solely in followers or filters. It's found when we actually follow Jesus' commandment to love our neighbors face to face. Now, I've talked a lot about the last year, probably every time I've taught, about how I've had to get really intentional about dialing down my online engagement to make space to become human again. But that's only half the equation when we're talking about community. I also have to lean into in-person connections and community. And this is something that was really challenging for me for a number of years. I was helping care for a sick family member, and I had to be really careful about limiting my exposure to crowds or people who had been sick. But that season has changed for me now, and I had gotten into rhythms that were more disconnected. So my family's had to get more intentional about saying, okay, what does it look like for us to rebuild these rhythms and structures in our own life so that we can create more opportunities for in-person connection with each other and with friends and family that we love. So one of the things we've done, this sounds really ridiculous, but we have one of those digital calendars that kind of helps us keep track of everything we need to do and who's going where. That's a way that we've leveraged technology for good. We love that. We had to add to our calendar family dinner, guys. Like, it was way too easy for that to just be a function and not a connection opportunity. And so now that's on all of our calendars. So If I'm just in a functional mode and I'm trying to make sure everybody's fed but not connecting, my kids will be like, hey, this is not what family dinner looks like. Yeah, we got to do this. We got to check it off the list. I got a rule follower, oldest child, who likes to check those boxes, so he keeps us on track. We've had to look at our calendar and say, like, can we invite some friends or family over for a meal? Just have them in our home. It doesn't have to be cleaned up or perfect. We just need this connection again. Sometimes for me, it's just about looking for ways to kind of lean in a little further. So, sometimes you'll have somebody on your mind all week and you'll just reach out with a text to say, hey, you're on my mind. I don't know why. I want you to know I'm thinking of you and I love you. I've started practicing saying, hey, would you have time or interest in meeting for coffee or lunch or something to just catch up in person? Sometimes they can't. Sometimes they're not interested in that. But it opens the door for me to have more of those real-world, in-person kind of connection opportunities. In terms of our practices for becoming, we're really leaning into these first 3 practices in this series. For me, I've noticed and named God's work in and around me. I noticed that there was a deficiency of that in-person connection. And I said, okay, God, what are we going to do about this? What do you want me to see about this? And then I choose what I want more. And I had to say, yeah, God, what I really want out of my life is I want to be the kind of person who reflects your heart for loving people. And I want to meet them where they really are, the way you've met me where I am. And so I want to learn what it looks like to be an unstoppable source of your love, wherever I go, whether that's in person or online. And then surrendering to the good news, surrendering to God's love, means that I have to then follow where God leads me. I have to intentionally look for opportunities and say yes to the opportunities that present themselves to really meet people face to face so that I can love them as they are. Because I can't practice loving my neighbor, let's be real, Jesus takes it a step further. He says, love your enemy. I can't practice loving my neighbor if I only ever see them through a hazy lens of followers and filters. I got to be able to meet them where they are and see them as they are. I need to be seen as I am, too. And we're leaning into these first 3 practices for becoming throughout this whole series. We talked a little bit about what it would look like for maybe us to say, hey, let's all do this together and do some sort of big challenge where we maybe delete certain apps from our phone, or we go on a social media fast or something like that. But we decided instead, we really want you to lean on what God is trying to show you about your own life, because we're all coming from different places in terms of our online engagement right now. So we're asking you to honestly evaluate, what does your online life look like right now? And is that online engagement moving you closer to or further away from the kind of person you really want to be? And then when you see that, choose what you want more and act on it. So what does God want you to notice and name about who you're becoming right now in our hyper-connected online world? Are you one of those people that's finding yourself hiding behind a crafted online persona, and you're robbing yourself of being truly seen and known by the real-world people that God's already put in your life? Or do you maybe have a false sense of connection to other people in our world because you feel like you know what's going on because you see everything they post online, or at least you see what the algorithm lets you see and what they've curated to let you see about their life? When was the last time you carved out intentional time for true face-to-face community? Now, I'm not trying to say that you can only ever experience true community when you're physically in the room with someone on a regular basis. That would be really bad news for those of us who have friends and loved ones that live really far away, myself included. But we have to be intentional about how we do this. We have to leverage this for good and not for evil. One of the ways that we as a church are trying to leverage the opportunities of an online world is through the Zoom groups that I talked about at the beginning of the gathering. We have a lot of those available because our Meadow Heights family, you guys are spread out over a very wide area. You have different work and family obligations, childcare challenges, all kinds of things that would maybe keep you from being in one spot more than once a week for our Sunday gatherings. And Zoom lets us do that. It's kind of amazing. We can overcome some geographic barriers and begin to experience community and growth alongside other people in our church family. And you can ask anybody who's been part of one of our Get Real groups, it is wild how well that works. Everybody comes in skeptical, they are not sure about the Zoom thing, and everybody leaves 10 months later feeling super close to these people because they logged on once a week to share how they see God at work in their life and to encourage each other to join him in what he's doing. It's amazing how that works. Now, I have to say, some of that community happens because we're super intentional about how we do those groups, because we know we got to push back against some of the challenges of an online environment. So like very first week in every group, you're going to hear the group leader say, hey, we're going to ask you to keep your video on, and we're going to show you how to keep the gallery view up on that so you can see everybody's faces and reactions the whole time, not just the person who's speaking. Because it's really hard to maintain a shiny, perfect online persona when like the family pet keeps shoving into the screen to see what's going on. Like, I love when that happens. Or in my case, during COVID, when you have two preschoolers at home and you've got a toddler who loves to streak by in the background screaming and half clothed, which was my reality more often than not. It's messy. It's messy when it's like that, but it's real life. And real life is when we get to see each other as we are, meet each other as we are, and love each other as we are. So maybe your next step is to lean into community by signing up for a Get Real group or one of our other online groups. If you're joining us online and you are one of those people that can only join us today in that way, I want to say not only are you welcome to sign up for these groups, but that may be extra important for you. Please take a chance to look over those and see if you can lean in further to being truly known and seen as a part of one of these groups. Now remember, all the info that you need about them is on the Meadow Heights app. It's way too much for us to go over in detail here. I would lose you before I get to the group that's right for you. So you heard a little bit of a synopsis that maybe helps you narrow in. If you're still unsure and you want to talk to a real human, talk to me, Jeremiah, Greg, Rachel. Any of us can maybe direct you to the group that might be right for you. But if you're feeling God nudge you to spend your online time more purposefully, I'm confident that one of these groups could help you do that. And you could find one that will work for you and help you move toward closer community. True community isn't going to be found in followers and filters. It's going to be found when we do the hard work of loving our neighbor face to face. In John 13:35, Jesus says, "This is how everyone will know that you are my disciples, when you love each other." This is what sets us apart as followers of Jesus. God met us up close, face to face, and he did so to show us what it looks like to love one another in the flesh, exactly what it looks like to embody God's love in real time and to meet people where they are. And the church is now called the body of Christ because we are now that flesh and blood, in-person representation of God's love in the world. One of the things that Jesus did before he left is he left us with a practice to remember, to help us remember that this is our holy calling. We practice communion together, and we are going to practice that together before we go today, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. Usually when we do this, we've just given you something deep to reflect on. So it's a quiet moment, and everyone is coming up in lines, and you're maybe nodding at someone, but you're mostly in your own little space. Today we're going to lean into community a little more. So I think Ursula and maybe some of her team are going to come and get those elements ready. We are going to take communion all together. So you're going to come up and get your elements, go back to your seat, and when everybody has those, I'm going to come back up, and we're going to do those as an act. We're going to do that together as an act of community and connection to one another in the room, face to face. But to do that, it's going to take a while, right, for everybody to get their stuff and go back, and we don't want it to be awkward. So you are going to be free to talk to each other. Mingle as you're doing it. I will watch time for us. We'll still get us out of here on time. Introverts in the room, don't freak out. This is going to last like 5 minutes and it'll be over. Extroverts, this is your time to shine. Make it easier on the introverts. If you're not sure what to talk about, just share with somebody one thing you're looking forward to in 2026. It's that time of year we're all reflecting on that stuff. Share something that you're looking forward to. Ask them what they're looking forward to. And everybody come, get your elements, and then I will come back up here and we will practice communion together. If you're online, you have some time. Go grab a cracker, some bread, juice, and join us to do this. You guys come and grab your stuff. Okay, guys. I'm so proud of you for taking me up on this. So proud. Sometimes the 9 o'clock gathering, you guys are more subdued than the 10:30, but you really leaned in. I love this. You get a chance to talk again, just pause these conversations. We'll dismiss in a few minutes, and you can resume all of those good connections. So, communion. We practice communion to remember that Jesus offered his own flesh and blood to love, serve, and redeem us. The bread represents his body that was broken for us. And when we take this together, we remember that we're his body now, and we get the opportunity to love and serve others in our world. Let's take the bread together. The juice represents Jesus' blood, which he willingly sacrificed and spilt to redeem us and to restore us to connection with him and with each other. And so let's take this together to remember him. Father, thank you that you created us for community, that you created us to have other people on the same journey along with us who are learning what it looks like to live and love like Jesus. Thank you for sending Jesus to show us what your love really looks like up close and in person, face to face. I pray that as we go out into our week, we would see the opportunities where you're already at work in the community and the connections we have in our online and offline worlds, and that we would join you with wisdom and grace and love to be your hands and feet in the world. Thank you that we get to do this together. We get to encourage each other along the way, and bring us back next week to continue this conversation. In your name, amen.